the lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. A single spotlight cut through the darkness and landed on a thin boy standing center stage, clutching a microphone like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. His name was Ethan, a 15-year-old from a small, forgotten town where dreams were often buried before they even began. He wasn't supposed to be here, not on this grand stage, not in front of millions watching around the world. But here he was, trembling, breathing hard, and whispering to himself, just one more prayer. Ethan had grown up in the shadows of hardship. His mother worked 2 jobs at a diner and a gas station, barely managing to keep a roof over their heads. His father had left when Ethan was 6, leaving behind nothing but an old guitar with broken strings and a note that said, "Keep the music alive." That guitar became Ethan's lifeline. He taught himself to play by watching old videos online, strumming until his fingers bled, singing quietly so he wouldn't wake his mother after her night shifts. Music was his escape, his way to dream beyond the cracked walls of their small apartment. At school, Ethan didn't fit in. His clothes were worn, his shoes torn. Some kids laughed at him, others just ignored him. But every Friday, when the bell rang and the halls emptied, Ethan would sneak into the music room. He'd sit by the old upright piano and sing to the empty seats. That's where his teacher, Mrs. Rivera, found him one day. She listened quietly as his voice filled the room, trembling but full of emotion. When he finished, she clapped softly and said, "Ethan, you have something the world needs to hear." It was Mrs. Rivera who convinced him to audition for Global Talent Search, a show that had changed lives before. Ethan laughed at the idea, he couldn't even afford the bus ticket to the city. But she smiled, pressed a folded $20 bill into his hand, and said, "Don't let life tell you no before you even try." The day of the audition, Ethan arrived with nothing but his father's guitar, a small backpack, and a heart full of hope. When the producer asked what song he'd sing, he hesitated. Then he said, "Livin' on a Prayer." The producer raised an eyebrow. "That's a big song for a kid." Ethan nodded nervously. So is life. When his name was called, he stepped onto the massive stage. The judges looked at him curiously, his clothes were faded, his shoes scuffed, and his guitar had scratches everywhere. But his eyes had something powerful, fear, yes, but also fire. The music started softly, the familiar chords echoing through the auditorium. His voice cracked on the first line, but he kept going, finding strength in the words. Whoa, we're halfway there. By the time he reached the chorus, something changed. His voice rose, raw and powerful, filled with every ounce of pain, love, and hope he had ever felt. The audience stood up. The judges stared in awe. Cameras captured tears falling down the cheeks of strangers who didn't even know his name but could feel his heart through every note. When the final line faded into silence, there was a beat, a breath of stillness, before the entire room erupted in applause. One of the judges hit the golden buzzer, and golden confetti rained down as Ethan covered his face, sobbing. Mrs. Rivera was in the audience, crying too, whispering, "You did it, Ethan. You did it." But behind that golden moment was a deeper struggle. After his audition went viral, Ethan faced the weight of fame he never expected. Reporters came knocking. Social media exploded with praise, but also criticism. Some people said it was all staged, that his story was too perfect to be real. The pressure built until Ethan almost broke. He wanted to quit. The fear of disappointing everyone, his mom, his teacher, his fans, became unbearable. One night, he went back to the small park where he used to practice. He sat on a bench, guitar in hand, and whispered to the sky, "Dad, I don't know if I can do this." Then, almost like an answer, he remembered his father's note, "Keep the music alive." That night, Ethan decided he wouldn't sing to impress anyone anymore. He'd sing for the people who needed hope. The ones who, like him, were barely holding on. At the finals, he walked on stage calmer than ever. When the music started, he sang not as a contestant, but as a storyteller. His voice carried the struggles of his childhood, his mother's strength, and every sleepless night he'd spent dreaming of this moment. By the end, the entire arena was standing again, some clapping, some crying. Even the toughest judge wiped a tear and said, "Ethan, you didn't just sing that song. You lived it." Ethan didn't win the competition that night. But when he walked off stage, his mother ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "You don't need a trophy," she said. You already changed the world. Years later, Ethan would look back on that moment and realize she was right. His video had reached millions. People wrote to him saying his voice gave them strength to keep going, to believe that even in the darkest times, they were halfway there, living on a prayer. And somewhere, in a small, quiet town, another kid picked up an old guitar and whispered, "If he can do it, maybe I can too." Ethan's story became more than a performance. It became a message, a reminder that sometimes the world doesn't need perfection. It needs heart. It needs courage. It needs one person willing to stand under a spotlight, sing through the fear, and show everyone that no matter how hard life gets, hope still sings.